So hi folks, here we are again. We're back with Janet Rich after a little break. Hi Janet.
Yep.
And thanks once again for sharing with us. So if you've not listened to part one, can I really encourage you to go back, listen to part one, and then this section will make more sense. We've had an opportunity to hear about how Janet had come to faith, how she had mixed experiences of church, but one of the brilliant ones was when her son was sick all over his pram, and somebody from the life of the church actually, didn't just say they're there and wipe things down, but actually took the care to find out where Janet lived and to kind of say, I'll come and I'll support you. I'll give you a lift next week, which made all the difference. Wonderful information there about Janet's experience of the Spirit. And we also talked about how Janet was interested, you were interested in helping create a sort of form of church and fellowship that related to you. And you said, I don't want to be condescending or arrogant. We certainly all get that. But church that relates to your culture. Can you say something perhaps maybe about what wasn't right about the experience of church that led you to think that way and how things progressed?
Pretty much everything, really.
Pretty much everything about church.
Yeah. I'm not a formal person. I found the formality of the church and the rigor of it really, really difficult. The church that we went to in Braintree, where we lived, had been my parents-in-law's church, and my father-in-law in particular was very well known in the town, and so when I was in church I was kind of representing George, and so everyone was just very, very formal. Nobody would hug or it was all very much like distant handshakes and polite conversation, and I just found the whole thing really difficult. I found a 20-minute sermon when I've got two small children almost impossible to respond to. I spent my entire time concentrating on whether the kids were being sick or doing what they do. One of them was sick quite a lot, and all of that stuff. And so the room to actually interact with God was minimal, really. So we left there and we went to the Methodist church, and that was a lot less formal and a lot more flowing, and I began to see that actually church could be different things which I hadn't seen before. And so I began to kind of the minister baptized his daughter, and he recast the hymn as "She Who Would Valiant Be," and I thought that was really shocking.
Wow.
She who could, what does he mean, changing the words of the hymn? And I realised that you could do that stuff, and you could do different, and people could play guitars and people did dance, and so that was really interesting. And then I came to Peterborough, and London Road was really formal. Joe was there at the time. Joe has what I can appreciate now as a lovely style, but at the time was very difficult for me. Again, still with small children. He disapproved profoundly of my children standing on the pews. So yeah, it was challenging, and I crept into church and crept out again. I took them the last minute. One of them slept through most of the services if I gave them a bottle at the right time, but the other one never ever slept. So it was a challenge. And then we had a weekend called ET, which was everyone together, and from that we started a lot of things really. The prayer group on a Saturday morning, and which is still going, and the Southsiders group. Debbie Riddy and I ran a class each of that, and Connie was involved for a long time, and that kind of grew. And Debbie said one day that she didn't feel the church was connected, and that she was going to start doing coffee after the service every Sunday morning, and people could stay or not stay. And it kind of changed who we were and what we were doing. And then I realised that okay, if there were things that I needed and I wanted, the thing to do was to get on and do them. So I did this experimental thing of doing a service at 9:15 on a Sunday morning. I didn't want to interrupt the 10:30 service. I didn't want to disrupt anything that anybody else was finding helpful, but I wanted to find a way of finding the thing that I think. Now, I think God called me to be a local preacher to make me read the Bible. I don't think he could. I don't think he found another way. And so this was the way. If you're going to prepare worship, you have to read, and you have to do your research, and you have to read round it and read different versions and all the rest of it. And I think that was God's purpose. So when I was doing this 9:15 thing, then I really had to think about what I was doing and what it meant. And my way always was to try and think outside the conventional box. So I would put myself in the situation, or I would try and look up how it would have been at that time, or something that gave me a tag into really thinking about the situation, always a different angle. And that's how it's gone on, really. And then it's like, well, Rodney is brilliant at leading the Bible studies and has been very committed in that, from that EC thing and the fellowship groups. But actually, I needed something slightly different. So we put that together, and we do that now once. We're doing once a fortnight at the moment. So there were lots of opportunities to have a go at things and see if you could make it work. The Kids Plus was, we started the Kids Plus because we had one mum who came with one child, and for 6 weeks, that's all we had. Emma turned up every Wednesday morning, and Debbie and I were there, and then gradually it began to kind of snowball, and now it's just huge. And I think that's the way that things in church go, that if someone gets called, it doesn't really matter if it's the minister or who it is. Someone with a leaning for a particular thing needs to have the courage to stand up and go, yeah, I can do that. Let's give it a go. I think that our membership, I don't approve of membership, but if we're going to have it, I think that it should commit us to doing something, not the same thing, because we all have different skills and talents, but to see ourselves as an active member of the community, and do something meaningful in that community. Because I think we waste a lot of talent. I think there's a lot of strong, talented people out there who, if we encourage them, could take the church on further. And I think one of the things that's happened at the moment is really interesting, is that people have voted with their feet or their buttons or whatever. If you talk, anyone you talk to has a different pattern that they've put together to sustain them during this period. So some people are having the written stuff, some people are coming online, some people are coming to your service, some people are coming to my service, some people are not doing any of it but are going watching stuff on TV, or going to the Methodist Central Hall. People are gathered together, whatever it is they need to survive. And I think in terms of coming back to the church, when the proper church is open, and I use that in inverted commas, we need to bear that in mind. We need to think about what it is that people drew together and how they sustained themselves in that period.
I think what you say is really helpful. I'm minded that to firstly think about how church has changed, because there's no question in my mind that I think churches, or all of the churches that I've been involved in, have changed.
Yeah.
I mean, from a kind of perspective of a minister, who frequently, I talk to people, and sadly there's a lot of conversations about sort of funerals at the moment, but whether it's baptisms, funerals, or weddings, the first thing that strikes me is that very often, if people are outside the church, they're they have no place to go to get an understanding of what church is like, to visualize it, apart from soap operas, and which is invariably poor and tends not to. It might show the church for a wedding. The ministers never end up ultimately kind of, sort of wholly positive character. I'll take that, because we're all flawed, but of course with the soap opera it's all, quite polarized. And apart from that, the only image that people have is songs of praise.
Yes.
And whilst I don't want to denigrate the BBC, I look at songs of praise, and firstly I think, well, it's recorded worship. And there used to be something on ITV called Worship Live. Easter People used to have a live worship service with ITV, didn't they?
Yeah.
I remember being at the one that was at Scarborough, I think. Or was it Blackpool? Can't remember. Anyway, but my point is that I think we're in real danger of people, if they have got an image of church, it being just quite unlike what the reality is now. And also, in fairness, that the church, I think we talk about proper church, and we continue to wrestle against that idea of proper church. But I think now more than ever, you're right in that we've naturally just grown because people have sort of said, okay, we've got our 10:30 or our 11 o'clock, but can we do something else in a small group setting? And that's where things have grown and grown and grown.
Yeah.
It's interesting you talk about membership. It's interesting with online, because we're not doubting that the church is a good place to be, that the fellowship there is life-giving, and can encourage other people. But I'm sort of, I'm really kind of interested in what's happening live stream, because the whole issue of belonging is up in the air.
Yeah.
So before we have membership, so folks might not be aware about membership. In the Church of England, there was confirmation. If you haven't heard the first bit, Janet confessed that actually one of the reasons for her own confirmation is she fancied the curate.
Yep.
But I say that lightly. I mean, everyone I talked about their confirmation, it's a point in the journey. It was significant, but not the end by a long way. Not the primary point where people feel moved. They invariably respond to other points as well in their lives that sharpens their faith. But we have the confirmation idea is that we commit to living in the church as the disciple, and as disciples we do stuff, even if it's just we pray for other people, but we do stuff in a disciplined and direct, in a clear way. So I totally agree with you that if you're building a Christian community, irrespective of the question of membership, that we need to encourage people to do something. Think, how are we going to respond? We just can't necessarily sit there and absorb all the worship, go off. Even if we're doing stuff that's not necessarily directly located in the church. I mean, your work with the number of people who are involved in other charitable work, that's still service. So I definitely get that. It's one of our pleasant headaches as I look online to think now people are, you're right, they are looking to create a discipline for themselves of online viewing and pay-per-viewing as well that fits for them, which now means that people are looking beyond a single congregation, I think, and are tapping into other things, but also leaves us as a church. And part of the reason for us doing this series, Me, Jesus and the Church, is to encourage everyone to make that definite link with a church somewhere, if we possibly can.
Yeah.
I mean, what have your experiences of live stream? Because I know in the background, I've just sort of, when we started I was looking back at our YouTube channel the other day as a circuit. I thought, 6 months?
Yes. Yeah. I've done 46.
Yeah, also, you think, oh crikey, don't look back at number 1.
No, I really wouldn't. No, having not known anything, really. So it's been a real learning experience, mega learning experience. And then someone comes along like Sue Halford, and she puts the YouTube things, and I think, oh, why have I not been doing that? And then you find another little bit that you didn't know at all. My experience of it is it gives me huge butterflies even now, to be going on and doing it. But once I'm doing it, it's okay. I had no intention of doing it. When we started last year, I was due to do the Mothering Sunday, which was the first Sunday, and then it was the Think date. So I did 2 in a row, And by the time I'd done 2 in a row, I realised that Shamila wasn't around. And so I decided that I needed to carry on. And I was, several people said, you know, can you carry on doing that? And I went, yeah, I think I can. Think, if you haven't come across it, is half an hour. It's a single Bible reading. It's not any hymns, and it's thinking. It's asking you to think about particular aspects of your faith. And so there's a delightful little man with a question mark who gives you time to actually think about your answers. And this week we were thinking about temptation, and we were thinking about what tempts you, what's your best way of fighting temptation. And I shared an article by a guy called Dr. Stanley, who was talking about practical ways to deal with temptation. And we weren't saying to each other, well, this is what I'm tempted by, or that's what I'm tempted by. We were just saying, generally, we all face temptation. We know that Jesus faced the temptation. And how can we learn and put that in our lives in a way that's helpful? So it's always practical. My whole preaching is a social gospel. I'm interested in what Jesus did while he was here and how he lived, and what difference, how we can get ourselves closer to that situation. And I think that preaching is about asking people the questions, not giving people the answers.
Very much my thought of thinking as well. I mean, it's interesting. My first response is, you know, when you sort of say my gospel is the social gospel, I say, well, what other gospel is there? I think at the same time, you see, I think at some point there must have been some kind of separation between the social gospel and the kind of evangelism. You know, as if the two were separate, and of course they're not in the least, because, you know, if we're able to create a community by the power and grace of the Spirit where people's lives are transformed and what the words we read are worked out in practice, then that's going to be even more powerful, you know, than just the promise. So I really relate to that, but it's encouraging hearing it come from you, because I know that you're so allied in that way. You know, you would never go, you know, you would never let go of the notion of being committed to Jesus. I mean, you talked about being committed.
I think what I mean when I say a social gospel is that if you questioned me on my theology, I would say that there's bits of it that are really quite wobbly, that I haven't got all my ducks in a row. You know, if you ask me about the afterlife and what I think about heaven, particularly what I think about hell, what I make of the devil, what about questions about angels, there's a lot of stuff that I've not worked out. There's a lot of stuff that I'm still working on. But the bit that I am absolutely clear about is that Jesus came to show us how to live. And that's the bit that for me is the nub of what I do.
And it's interesting, by word of encouragement to others, I think those are perfectly reasonable things to say. I know more and more about what I'm unsure of.
Yeah, less and less. More and more about less and less.
Yeah. But I think at the same time we become more fixed and focused on. Well, I've sort of said it before in the early videos. With, you know, that the earliest creed is Jesus is Lord. The thing that attracts people is the death and resurrection of Jesus in the epistles. There's very little focus on the virgin birth in the epistles. It's just not there. And there's this understanding that we find peace with God, the forgiveness of sin and guilt through our relationship with Jesus, and that's it. And the starter is there. So my creeds are really short. I mean, I have the shorter creed. Yeah. But also because I'm mindful, Janet, and I'm sure of how we invite people into our churches, and if they get there, then we give them the Apostle Creed or the Nicene Creed, and it's crikey, Riley, you know, there's so much in there. Yeah. I'm not saying that it's not worthy, but actually no. Starting point. No. But name me one other person, you know. I struggle to find any. I worry when I hear certitude about the nature of hell, or the nature of the devil, if it's not broadly, you know, if the nature of the devil and temptation isn't broadly into, I struggle with that. I struggle with a fundamentalist interpretation of the scriptures in that kind of way. And so I don't think you're alone in that, and I don't think other people are alone in that. And I think it's really encouraging for people to, you know, to hear that.
Yeah.
But it's a case of knowing, in an era of so much uncertainty, what we can actually be certain of.
Yeah.
And that's what's coming across, you know, that it's possible to have that personal relationship with Christ. How have you found, so you use Zoom, I think. You started off using Zoom. You use Zoom and Facebook Live.
That's right, I do. Yeah.
And how have you found that people have responded in the kind of comment section for Facebook?
Well, they're very positive. I mean, I presume if you weren't going to be positive, you wouldn't be, because they're nice people. People have. I mean, I don't mean that to say people haven't questioned me or challenged me in those things. But yeah, on the whole, it's really positive. But the Facebook and the Zoom groups are very different, I think, because the Facebook is like standing up in front of a church. You are giving out. People on the whole can't give back to you, whereas in Zoom it's much more interactive.
Yeah.
And there are certain people who won't come to a group in case they're being asked to speak. And there are at least a couple of people in the prayer group who have come because, I think, because they've been told they don't have to speak, and it's okay not to speak. And I think that a lot of people find Cafe Church quite difficult. I found Cafe Church absolutely fascinating. It's absolutely where I would like to be. But for a lot of people, being put on the spot about things is really uncomfortable. So they would choose not to be there. And there are issues about hearing people in a room if your hearing's not 100%. So there's a variety of responses, I think. And I think that online, and I think what you do online is very, very different. And again, people need that variety of being able to be and find the métier that suits them, that they can link into. It's very interesting that people who I have thought to be quite formal say, "Oh yeah, listen to you while I was eating my toast over breakfast." Yeah, but you're someone who wouldn't come necessarily, wouldn't be comfortable necessarily at a Cafe Church, but is quite happy to be in that relaxed thing. Or people will say to you, "No, I was busy this morning, so I'll listen to you later," or whatever. But there are people. I'm blown away by the range of people who are involved in the thing. I have two listeners in Australia.
Just moving back, I think one of the things when we sort of set out, I mean, as a circuit of churches, you know, there was a need in terms of, I don't like the word branding, but to be absolutely sort of clear across. I've got my own profile, the circuit Facebook page, the website, you know, to be sort of clear about origins and sort of, and this is the Methodist Church. So this is the Methodist Church presenting itself. So there was, on the one hand, this desire for kind of unity in whatever we produce, but then that doesn't mean that everything's the same, because I think the thing that I found, you know, in an ideal world, we would all think, well, we'll do it all on Zoom, or we'll do it all on Facebook, and we'll all use the same software. But I have found, you know, we're working with Dale and working with Matt, and that actually people, that's not the right place to start. It's like, start with whatever you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
And so rather than us all using, say, open broadcast software or XSplit, whatever it is, that's been a kind of lesson for me. You just have to let, you know, Dale go, "Oh, Ecamm." Sorry, folks, if you're just not really with us at the moment, you know. But so it was, and then shifted to actually, we want the individualism there. We don't want it all to be the same.
No.
You know, and so, because I think that adds to the mix. And I think as well, I wonder when we go back into church and face to face and we're preaching, are we going to be suddenly looking down for where the rewind button is on the sermon? Somebody should write a book as well about stuff that you could do on Facebook Live, but not in Zoom. So Zoom, you cannot have a shower and listen to the service. Facebook. No. But I think for me, I have just been, like you, this is a point where we have connected with numbers of people who we haven't connected with before. No. And what's beholden on us is to how we encourage those people to make a connection with church, a congregation. And if we're faithful and not sort of just prescriptively Methodist saying, well, just enable people in their discipleship. Let's not, sure, we want to support people, but find yourself a local church that you are connected with. But also it's just, ramped up our connection with people who are homeless or caring, not homeless, people who are housebound or caring for people at home, for partners or people working shifts. So amazing. But I think the thing that I've spotted is the prayer requests coming through. People are so vulnerable in that, and people's graciousness, even though sounds like we're very similar. I'm moderately okay behind the camera until I get a little red symbol saying we're having problems here in the software. Or somebody says I can't hear you, or I have no idea what to do with it if it goes wrong at all. But what surprised me is the grace that people show. Yeah, they'll sit around for half an hour. Yeah, and they'll wait for you. So it's great. Yeah. And just to close, Janet, I'd be really interested just if there's somebody out there listening who's perhaps had a troubled background in the past or is thinking about faith and going to church, what would you share with them about faith and about going to church? I would say give it a try, give it a good try, don't just go once. But if it's not the right place for you, move on. Because I believe that there is a church for everybody. It may not be your most local church or the church that you have been traditionally part of, but there will be a church for you. So give yourself an opportunity, go 4 times. If that doesn't work, brush the dust off your feet, as Jesus said, and go somewhere else. That's brilliant. And of course, it goes without read the fact that your testimony's been that the presence and power of the Spirit is real and sufficient, more than sufficient for us to deal with the difficulties we might have had in the past. So, Janet, thank you so much for sharing with us. It's been an absolute delight. And just to say to folks out there, don't forget, yes, we are contactable for various means. You can see all the contactable links on Facebook and on YouTube, and don't hesitate to get in contact with us if it would be helpful. And we can signpost you in the right direction. But meanwhile, Janet, I just wish you all the best in your unfolding ministry, wherever it. Thank you. As Viv comes to join us as well. Yeah, that'll be really exciting. We're looking forward to that. And as usual, it's not. I did contact Viv, and she's able to record on video, for example, but she's not done live stream, but she's done podcasts. I've never done podcasts before. I've got so we'll just see, in this new digital age. Yeah. Well, I'm hoping when Viv comes, we'll get together and she can decide how she wants to take it forward. And that, I think, is the archetypal thing, I think, for everyone in the church that you've spotted. Despite Joe's kind of originally back then sort of formal way, that the willingness to release people to go, actually, could I do this? Can I use my gifts in this way? We're a place where people can use their gifts and where people can speak their minds as well. Indeed. So, yes. Thank you very much, Janet. And we wish you the best in all your ministry. Thank you. Take care and stay safe. Thank you. God bless.